If you move a resumption motion, then you vote on the resumption motion.
Can we get back to the meeting, please? And thank you to the clerk. There's a motion to resume debate. We're going to proceed with a vote, and that's where we're at. Correct? Good.
Just point of order.
On resuming the debate.
It's a dilatory motion to resume the debate. Okay.
Is there going to be a vote?
Yep.
All in favor?
Recorded vote. Recorded vote.
Recorded vote.
Ms. O'Connell,
Yes.
Mr. McKinnon,
Yes.
Mr. Badaway,
Oui.
Mr. Zeb, Mrs. Ab,
Yes.
Mr. Gay online,
In favor?
Mr. Caputo,
No.
Mr. Shipley,
No.
Mr. Mutz, Mr. Genius,
No.
Madame Michaud,
En faveur.
Monsieur Boulris,
Oui.
7 in favor, 4 against.
Wait, point of order, Chair. Could you share the speaking list on the motion? Because if we're resuming, presumably we're restoring the old speaking list. So just if you could share what that is.
It was what I had, it was Mr. Shipley and Mr. Mutz.
Just to clarify, though, I had the floor.
That's what I had from my list. Okay, that's
Sure.
what I had.
Mr. Clerk, if you can just clarify, I had the floor at the time when we
Could you address
adjourned.
the clerk through the chair, please?
Sure. Just Mr. Clerk, through you, Mr. Chair, to the clerk. I had the floor when we adjourned. So if we're resuming, my understanding would be that I have the floor now to resume.
Point of
But in
order.
any event, if I could be added to the list, as
Order over here.
Thank you, Chair. Usually when you resume debate, the speaking list renews. But if members opposite want to filibuster this meeting, that's their
Thank-
prerogative. We're ready to vote.
Thank you.
Point of order also. Point of order.
Point of order, Mr. McKinnon.
So when we last spoke on this matter, it was for a different motion. It was a motion to go to a different order of business and to give Mr. Caputo the chair. For that motion, Mr. Jennis had the floor, but this is not the motion that has been moved.
just on the same point of order, Chair, if I can clarify, there was the original motion and there was the resumption motion. In both cases, I had the floor when there was
time.
adjournment.
You're not going to get your clip
And
quota.
just in response to Ms. O'Connell, I'm obviously disappointed that Liberals have overruled the agenda here, but we didn't move that motion, they did.
Mr. Genius, you have the floor.
Well, thank you very much, Chair. So what we've seen happen today, just to briefly review, is that an agenda was sent around whereby 2 ministers would appear to discuss the grave problem of car theft in this country.
Point of order.
Conservatives...
Relevance, Chair. We're dealing with the amendment on Mr. Jennis's
I literally haven't
motion.
finished a sentence.
Thank you, Ms. O'Connell. Mr. Genius, continue.
Thank you, Chair. And Ms. O'Connell, I know attends many committees. I hope that has led to some familiarity with the rules of committees. I will certainly speak on the motion, but I do. I'm sorry for knocking that off, but I hope it doesn't to ruin anything. Chair, but the context in which we're discussing this motion ever so briefly is that we had a meeting today scheduled to hear from ministers on car theft, and our position was that the ministers were making themselves available for an extremely limited period of time, only for an hour together. Nonetheless, we were and we remain prepared to use that time to ask the ministers important questions about this issue. The Liberals have moved a motion, sadly with the support of the NDP and the Bloc, to move to a different item of business, which is procedurally in order, but I think substantively objectionable, because we have two ministers of the Crown here that are supposed to be prepared to answer questions on auto theft. And I can only conclude, because of the Liberal decision to move a motion to proceed to an order of business, that they're not interested in allowing their ministers to testify on this matter. We have a draft subcommittee report before this committee that contains in it a number of provisions that we have certainly been prepared to discuss with other parties in hopes of coming to a reasonable conclusion. But the core issue in the subcommittee report and in the amendment I've put forward is the proposed report on the transfer of Paul Bernardo. This committee 6 months ago held some hearings on the transfer of one of the most heinous criminals in this country's history from maximum security to medium security prison, and the lack of engagement with and information to the families that was associated with that transfer. And those hearings only happened because Conservatives insisted that they happen. Liberals and other members of this committee wanted to prevent families from having their day in Parliament, and we pushed back on that, and we were indeed very insistent on allowing those families to be heard. It has now been 6 months since those hearings happened. Drafting instructions were provided to the analysts at a meeting in early December. After drafting instructions were provided, I can only assume that a report was prepared. So in our amendment to the subcommittee report, we are taking the position that the report must be complete. That's why we proposed this amendment to the subcommittee report. Now, we have had a number of meetings at which it would have been useful to discuss the subcommittee report. At every case, the Liberals did not allow even basic discussion of the subcommittee report. The first meeting this was brought up, the discussion was adjourned. At the subsequent meeting, no time was. Witnesses were scheduled on another matter, and we should have been discussing the subcommittee report. And we proposed to adjourn. Pardon me. We presumed to resume consideration of the subcommittee report on that time. There was no agreement to do so. So Liberals would like us to effectively kill the Bernardo transfer report by passing a subcommittee report that does not make mention of it. It is in that spirit that we put forward this amendment. And now Liberals are trying this silly game today, where on the one hand they schedule ministers, but on the other hand, the chair, as was demonstrated, chose to give the floor to Ms. O'Connell, who then moved a motion to proceed to another matter of business. Look, our ministers have a lot of work they could be doing. Mr. LeBlanc has a leadership campaign to be working on, as well as a busy file.
Mr. Chair, point of order. I could do it from here too. So it's
well, I do see Minister LeBlanc is working on bringing Minister Rodriguez on side for his campaign, and so he has not only begun his campaign, he's secured his first, I was going to say high-profile endorsement, but medium-profile endorsement. I know Minister Jolie thought she had Montreal wrapped up, but Minister Rodriguez may give her a run for money. Chair, I think I've just made the point in terms of what we should be discussing today. I'll say Conservatives are happy to discuss the subcommittee report at a time when we don't have ministers. I would encourage the chair to schedule the resumption of discussion of the subcommittee report at the next meeting, so that this matter can be concluded. Conservatives would love to come to an agreement on the subcommittee report that leaves intact the various other sections of the subcommittee report as discussed, but does include an opportunity to get to the bottom of some of these outstanding matters. So the amendment calls for, in particular, the draft report on the transfer of Paul Bernardo to be immediately distributed to committee members, and then notwithstanding any other item mentioned, with the exception of testimony by ministers, the committee not hold any other hearings or present any reports to the House until the committee has completed and presented its report to the House on the Bernardo prison transfer. That's our position, and I think, in respect to the minister's time and the important issue of auto theft, I would move that we adjourn debate.
Okay. Adjourn debate, and we're going to do a recorded vote. All those in favor?
Ms. O'Connell.
No.
Mr. Baraway.
No.
Mr. McKinnon.
No.
Zab.
No.
Mr. Gay.
No.
Madame Michaud.
Contre.
Are you on the list?
Monsieur Caputo.
Yes, to hear from the ministers.
Mr. Shipley.
Yes.
Mr. Mott.
Yes.
Mr. Genius.
Yes.
Monsieur Boulris.
No.
7 pour, 4 contre.
Defeated. Continue, Mr. Genius, please.
Chair, well, we've had another vote here, and Conservatives have proposed that we be able to hear from the ministers on the issue of auto theft. And bizarrely, we have the cover-up coalition trying to prevent the ministers from being able to testify. I noticed that there's a repeated pattern of Liberals trying to prevent prospective leadership candidates from being able to share their views before parliamentary committees. We were trying to give Mr. Carney an opportunity to present at the Finance Committee yesterday, and Liberals were very opposed to that. Now we're trying to give Mr. LeBlanc an opportunity to present here at the Public Safety Committee.
Point of order.
And Liberals are preventing it again. You would think that they would want to give people the opportunity to share their
Point of order.
I'm
approaches.
confused by Mr. Jennis. We moved his motion. He seems resolved that we not be able to vote on his motion. We've heard hours of his argument on why his motion is worth supporting, but he won't let it come to a vote. So I wonder if he could clarify that point.
Thank you, Mr. McKinnon. Mr.
Yeah,
Genius.
though not a point of order, I think I'm happy to clarify what has occurred. So I think the record will show actually that debate on my motion has barely occurred. It's maybe been 3 or 4 minutes of discussion. Just to review this. What happened, I can't remember the precise dates, but there was a meeting. There have been 2 meetings, broadly speaking, where this matter has been under consideration. The first meeting was one in which the chair presented the subcommittee report. I began to read an amendment into the record. The chair then suspended so that the amendment could be distributed in writing and translated. Then a vote began, so the meeting was immediately adjourned. There was no debate on that time at on the main motion. Then at the next meeting, I sought unanimous consent for a motion to resume consideration at that time, and Mr. Biddle forcefully denied unanimous consent to allow us to resume consideration of this motion at that time. So the Liberals have persistently prevented the issue of the Bernardo transfer in the context of this amendment from even being considered. And now they have strangely brought two ministers to a committee, pretending that they want to let those ministers testify. But then instead of going to the ministers, the chair, Mr. MacDonald, who I think people will know is a Liberal MP. I know he does his best in the context of the job, but he is a Liberal MP, chose to give the floor to Ms. O'Connell before the ministers could testify, which is a strange thing to do. If you have ministers here to testify, normally you wouldn't just give the floor to Ms. O'Connell, and it certainly implies that there was a plan to not have the ministers testify. That is to move consideration of a different matter. So Ms. O'Connell is in fact agreeing with me. It sounds that it's highly suspicious, and I agree. It is highly suspicious. And so she moved the motion that we not allow the ministers to appear on a different item, and that is what has then directed us to a different item here. This is an item that needs to be discussed. We're not going to dispense with the discussion of the subcommittee report under this kind of artificially designed pressure tool by the government. We want to hear from ministers, and we also want to discuss the subcommittee report. So my suggestion would be that we proceed to hear from the ministers, and then we can set aside some time to discuss the subcommittee report. I would even say there may be resources that allow the resumption of discussion of the subcommittee report after the ministers and the other scheduled witnesses have appeared. So, in hopes that members will see the benefit of allowing this to occur, I would move that we proceed to hearing from the ministers.
So is that a motion you're asking
Yeah,
for?
it's a dilatory motion. I think it's page 1187, but I might be off by a little bit. But it's a motion to proceed to hearing from the ministers. We could even pass it on division.
So we'll proceed with a vote.
Recorded vote?
Recorded vote, please, for the second time.
No.
Mr. Badawi?
No.
Mr. McKinnon?
No.
Ms. Zaid?
No.
Mr. Gair?
No.
Mr. Caputo?
I vote yes to hear from the ministers.
Mr. Shipley? Yes. Mr. Matz?
Yes.
Mr. Genius?
Yes.
Madame Michaud?
Contre.
Monsieur Boulris?
Contre.
Yeas 7, nays 4.
Defeated. Continue, Mr. Genius, please.
Well, thank you, Chair. I had hoped that the intervening moments had provided opportunity for clarification of conscience among some of my colleagues, but sadly that has not occurred. This is a truly bizarre display. Je vais noter que cette étude sur la
This study on auto theft was proposed by the Bloc, but today the Bloc has decided to vote against it and to give the opportunity to ministers to answer questions. It's very strange.
Bloc are allegedly concerned about this issue, and yet we have proposed multiple times that we adjourn debate on this other matter to allow the ministers to speak. I just proposed a motion that we proceed to hearing from the ministers, and yet we have this Liberal Bloc NDP tactic of blocking ministers from presenting. This is consistent with the evident desire of Liberals to prevent any prospective leadership candidates from being heard at committee. But I do think Mr. LeBlanc, as well as Mr. Rodriguez, should be held accountable on their file. Now, that said, Ms. O'Connell, who was suspiciously given the floor at the beginning of the meetings, and she's reinforced the point, suspicious. I do welcome the sort of Greek chorus reinforcement of my messages today. She suspiciously put forward a motion to suspiciously was given the floor by the chair, and then when she was given the floor, moved a motion to shift to a different item, an item that was not on the agenda, an item involving the subcommittee's report. So here we are, and I have tried through a number of dilatory motions to give the committee the opportunity to return to hearing from the ministers, but those proposals have been blocked by the cover-up coalition. And I hope other colleagues will see reason here, see the outcome, and realize that it is better to give the ministers an opportunity to present and give us an opportunity to ask them questions. But on the subcommittee report, then, this is an amendment we are debating that I proposed to the 7th report of the subcommittee on agenda and procedure. And the amendments that we propose are to a number of different sections. We have not proposed any changes to sections of the subcommittee report that deal with Bill S-210. So any suggestions to the contrary are verifiably false. This amendment is public. The amendment does not in any way impact the sections that deal with the study of Bill S-210. They deal with other matters. The first change is in Section 3 of the subcommittee report. The existing section proposed that the ministers appear together. It actually deals with the appearance of ministers. It proposes that ministers appear together for the first hour of a meeting. And we proposed instead that be amended to say that the ministers appear separately for 1 hour each on the study of auto theft. This amendment is consistent with a proposal made publicly yesterday as well, reinforcing our belief that the ministers, if each minister has an hour of time available, then it makes more sense that they appear individually for an hour so that they could each individually be asked questions about their own individual activities and their own work on their own portfolio. Liberals are clearly doing everything they can to minimize ministerial accountability, first by saying that the ministers would appear together all at once, but then now by moving this motion from Ms. O'Connell to prevent ministers from being able to testify and repeatedly lining up with their coalition partners to prevent us to proceed to hearing from the ministers. But our proposal, as part of the amendment to the subcommittee report, was, I think, frankly, quite generous in terms of ministerial appearance. We did not propose they appear for 2 hours each on auto theft. We proposed rather that they appear for 1 hour each. In the context where the ministers have said they have an hour available to them, then it would have been reasonable for them to appear separately for an hour each. So that's what we proposed. I did also propose that we invite the Minister of Public Safety to appear for 1 hour to answer questions on ArriveCan. And I can tell from his expression that Mr. LeBlanc is very interested in addressing the ArriveScam scandal. Yeah, we have been able to have a number of different witnesses, public servants, deputy ministers come repeatedly to answer important questions on the ArriveScam scandal, but we have had ministers relatively reluctant to appear. Although I will say one of Mr. LeBlanc's fellow contenders in the upcoming Liberal leadership race, Minister Anand, did appear and answer to not 2 hours, 1 hour worth of questions at the Public Accounts Committee. So Ms. Anand has exceeded her future competitor, Mr. LeBlanc, in terms of her willingness to appear before committee Arrive Scam scandal. Of course, the Arrive Scam scandal is something that happened. It involves procurement, it involves various issues, but crucially it involves the CBSA, and there seem to be some significant problems there in terms of officials even pointing the fingers at each other, accusing each other of lying, and this is why in our subcommittee report we have proposed that Minister LeBlanc be given the opportunity to answer questions from members of Parliament on the issue of the Arrive Scam scandal. And we've been very generous in our proposal, only 1 hour. So Minister LeBlanc, the committee would, I think, be interested in hearing from this minister on the Arrive Scam scandal, what he knew when, what he did with that information, if he thinks it's normal that a two-person company based in a basement somewhere received an overwhelming amount of money from his department, and what he did with that information once he received it. We do have a system of ministerial accountability in which ministers should answer questions. Of course, the agenda for today was to have ministers answer questions on auto theft. But look, there are many issues, the main estimates, of course, but also foreign interference, the proliferation of corruption and scandal under his watch, and various other matters that we would be interested in hearing from the minister on, which is why, as part of the subcommittee report, we had proposed amendments that would allow for meaningful questioning of ministers instead of for this very, very limited and abbreviated interaction. And I know members of this committee, members of the public, are very interested in us having that opportunity to question ministers. So on that vein, I would propose having elapsed and perhaps having persuaded some members, I would propose that we now proceed to hear from the ministers.
Thank you. Recorded vote, please.
On division.
Ms. O'Connell.
No.
Mr. Baraway. No. Mr. McKinnon. No. Ms. Zaid.
No.
Monsieur Gaillard.
No.
Mr. Caputo.
Yes, for the fourth time to hear from the ministers.
Mr. Shipley.
Yes.
Mr. Mutz.
Yes.
Mr. Genius.
Yes.
Madame Michaud.
Contre.
Monsieur Boulris.
No.
Yeas 4, nays 7.
Defeated? Yes.
First of all, Chair, Mr.
Sorry,
Janice,
point of order. Is
it's
Ms.
a point of
O'Connell on
order,
a point of order?
and I have a floor. So you can wait. Thanks.
Point of order. Is
you
it a
can
point
wait.
of order?
I have a
It's a
point of order on the floor, so you can wait.
You don't have the floor. You do have a point of
I
order.
actually do, and you're not the chair, so you can wait and don't speak over me, as I've said multiple times. Chair, Mr. Janice can't continue to make the same motion over and over. And if he wants to hear from the ministers, we have no speakers up. We're prepared to vote on his own amendment, that he's filibustering his own amendment. We're prepared to
not a point of
vote
order, Chair.
and get right to
Thank you.
the
It's
ministers.
not a point of order.
Thank you, Ms. O'Connell. Mr. Jenius, do you have a point of order?
No, I have the floor, though, so I'll just continue. I
Well, you were
suppose.
talking, so I
Oh,
thought you
so
might
yeah,
have
yeah,
said.
well. Sorry, Chair, I was just maybe clarifying for Ms. O'Connell that typically when someone raises a point of order, it relates to matters of order, not their opinions about what should or shouldn't happen. I will just say that in terms of the moving of dilatory motions, the practice, the rule is that if there are intervening activities that have occurred that could materially impact the outcome, then a motion may be moved. So having presented very persuasive arguments, I had thought about the value of hearing from ministers. I thought it was legitimate, and clearly you thought so as well, to allow us to move the motion again. We have Ms. O'Connell is talking fairly loudly, which I don't normally object to, but since she vociferously objected to me doing it, I think it's sort of worth acknowledging. Anyways, Chair, we have, as the committee has seen, repeatedly moved for us to be able to hear from the ministers. We've put forward motions to proceed to hearing from the ministers. We've proposed amendments to allow ministers to appear for more time. And it's clear that the Liberals did not want to allow the ministers to appear, and they and their coalition partners have repeatedly blocked our attempt to proceed to hearing from the ministers on these important matters, and that's a big problem. I hope that we can adopt the subcommittee report. I hope that we can adopt that through some negotiations among parties that recognize the changes that need to be made. Because, frankly, the original draft of the subcommittee report was clearly wildly unacceptable. It did not provide for the completion of important matters, which this committee has already agreed to. So the number of other changes that we proposed as part of this amendment, we proposed to remove the reference to drafting report on the auto theft issue for May 30th, because we believe instead that additional meetings should be held on the auto theft study. And then point 5, we amended. Point 5 is regarding the statutory review of the National Security and Intelligence Committee, a very important review required by law and that has not occurred. I believe other parties were highlighting the importance of this issue, and then the proposal for a study in relation to the statutory review had been reduced to merely a briefing on the statutory review, which is not consistent with I think our statutory obligations. So the amendment we proposed to the subcommittee report was that the committee undertake the statutory review of the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians Act as required by law. Excuse me. With a goal to complete that review before the end of 2024. This corresponds to a legislated obligation to complete a statutory review, and that statutory review relates to a critical matter of national security. And it's in a context where we know about the significant issues of foreign interference, which may well be back before this committee soon in the form of study on the government's proposed legislation on this. There is a significant and important relationship between the work of NSECOP and the problem of foreign interference. In many past NSECOP reports, alarm bells have been rung in the public versions of those reports, and I can only assume even more forcefully in the private versions of those reports. Alarm bells have been rung in relation to the problem of foreign interference. So there is I think an important connection between a review of the work of NSECOP and understanding understanding how we can do better on the issue of foreign interference. But the new proposed item 6 really is at the heart of what Conservatives are proposing in relation to changes to the subcommittee report. What we are proposing, the new item 6, is that the draft report on the transfer of Paul Bernardo be immediately distributed to committee members, and that notwithstanding any other items mentioned, with the exception of testimony by ministers, the committee not hold any other hearings or present any reports to the House until the committee has completed and presented its report to the House on the Bernardo prison transfer. And I'll just say in general, with respect to this amendment, the issues raised by the subcommittee report, Conservatives are prepared to discuss and to negotiate on the various provisions. We're proposing a number of additional meetings on the auto theft study. We're proposing hearings on a number of other subjects. We are prepared to negotiate on all of those items and try to come to a consensus with respect to the agenda of the committee going forward. But a fundamental point for us is that the hearing on the Bernardo transfer lead to a report, that the report, which has already been drafted, be distributed, and that members complete the work on that report. The normal process through which parliamentary committees operate is that they conduct studies on legislation or on other important public issues of the day. When those studies are complete, they provide drafting instructions to analysts. Those analysts prepare a report which are then considered by committee, amended, recommendations added, etc., then adopted and reported to the House. And this reflects a core principle of how our parliamentary system is supposed to work, that parliamentary committees exist to facilitate the detailed study of specific public issues and to allow committee members to sort of become experts on specific policy areas, but then to use their expertise to inform Parliament as a whole. So the function of reporting to the House, of informing the House on the activities of parliamentary committees is obviously central to what they do. Parliamentary committees aren't just, it's not just a think tank somewhere over here. It's a creature of Parliament with a reporting function to Parliament. And then when studies are completed, typically pursuant to Standing Order 109, the committee would request that the government provide a written response, and the opportunity is then for the government to review the report, to identify areas where they disagree or where they agree or where they take note and provide some explanation about their policy in that respect. And then there's also an opportunity for concurrence, that is for a debate in the House whereby members of Parliament can pronounce themselves in general on whether they agree with the conclusions of the report or not. So it's clearly part of the function of committees to conduct hearings, and that gives people opportunities to speak and brings greater attention and focus to a particular subject. But the committee's work should not happen in a vacuum isolated from the activities of Parliament, that those hearings should be a means by which the committee develops its expertise, comes up with specific recommendations, and informs the House about the results. And so when a committee undertakes a study and when witnesses are called, I think there's a reasonable expectation among at least those who are informed about the mechanics of this process that their testimony will contribute to the deliberations of Parliament more broadly. Sometimes it's a personal sacrifice of time, or because the committee is asking them to delve into matters that are very personal or difficult to talk about. But witnesses who choose to appear are making those sacrifices with likely a goal in mind, that the challenges, the sacrifices associated with testifying are worth it insofar as they then create the opportunity for policy changes to be driven through the committee's process. And so that's just the normal thing. That's not an original proposition being made that, hey, maybe committees should provide reports on things that they study. That's the way every committee in every room and every policy issue works, outside of some very narrow exceptions. That committees study issues, they prepare reports. Those reports go to the House, which then create an obligation, if desired, for a government response, and create a potential opportunity for the House to debate and pronounce itself as a whole on those conclusions. That is the committee process, and that was the spirit in which the committee undertook its work in the late fall on the Bernardo transfer. And it's just worth recalling, I was here at the Public Safety Committee when we were pushing for this issue to be studied. And the other parties then, as now, resisted any kind of discussion or engagement on the issue of the Bernardo prison transfer. We wanted to get to the bottom of what happened, why families weren't informed, et cetera. And Liberals did not want that to happen. So we had to persistently use a variety of different tools available to us to insist that the families of the victims be heard. And this was in a context where they were not properly informed at all about the prison transfer. As I recall, they were told day of that the prison transfer was happening when it was already effectively a fait accompli. The families of the victims did not have their day prior to the transfer, but we believe that they should be given their day in Parliament. And that includes the opportunity to testify, but then the subsequent opportunities for that testimony to drive substantive policy changes. So this is what we proposed with respect to the Bernardo prison transfer, and then eventually we were able to get those hearings to happen. There was an in-camera meeting to discuss drafting instructions. I wasn't there, and yeah.
Up one moment. Could I have everybody just quiet down a little bit? If you're going to have a conversation, could you take it outside? Because we're having a problem with the hearing. Thank you. Continue.
Well, thank you, Chair. This is the first time I've been told to take it outside at a committee, but I felt that way at times, but I've never said it. So, Chair, just based on the conversations happening around the room and the intervening time that has taken place, I think there may be an appetite to let the ministers testify. So I will propose that we proceed to hearing from the ministers.
Point of order. That's out of order, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. O'Connell. We'll continue to a vote, please. Recorded vote? Yep. All right.
Ms. O'Connell.
No.
Mr. Badaway.
No.
Mr. McKinnon.
No.
Ms. Zaid.
No.
Mr. Gay.
No.
Mr. Caputo.
Yes, for the fifth time to hear from the ministers.
Mr. Shipley.
Yes.
Mr. Mutz.
Yes.
Mr. Genius.
Yes.
Madame Michaud.
Contre.
Monsieur Boulris.
No.
4 en faveur, 4 yeas, and 7 nays.
Defeated. Mr. Genius?
We have, again, repeatedly tried to give the ministers the opportunity to testify. I have, for the third time, explicitly proposed a motion asking that we proceed to hearing from the ministers. And 3 times in a row, all of the Liberal members, as well as their partners in the bloc in the NDP, have voted against allowing the ministers to appear, and that's quite shocking. That we would have 2 ministers here, that the agenda would say that ministers appear, but that Liberal members would move a motion to proceed to a different item to prevent the ministers from appearing, and that members would then repeatedly vote against the opportunity to hear from ministers. Clearly, we have to address the subcommittee report. I'm very happy for us to debate the subcommittee report after the ministers, even later today, or we could have debated it previously if there had been agreement to proceed to it. We can certainly debate it at the next meeting. I am struck by, in particular, Ms. Michaud, who as I recall, had proposed previously that this committee undertake a study of auto theft, is now voting with the Liberals to deny herself the opportunity to ask questions to the ministers. And Ms. O'Connell may want to add herself to the speaking list.
I was just saying it's interesting how you go after the 2 women
are
on the
we
committee. That's an interesting
are we
point.
allowing crosstalk, Chair, or not? I think my record will show that when other ministers or other members have raised things, I've challenged them as well. Actually, maybe that's probably not even worth dignifying with a response. But just to the point about the issues of motor vehicle theft, I do want to share some stats about the dramatic increase in vehicle thefts that have occurred under this government.
Point of order. Vehicle thefts is not relevant to the matter in question. I urge Mr. Dennis to stick to the matter in question.
Mr. McKinnon, I'm happy to respond to you. Unfortunately, your point of order does seem to reveal that you haven't read the amendment that we're discussing. The amendment says in additional proposed point 8, quote, that the committee hold 4 additional meetings as part of its auto theft study before the end of June. We might have to shift those timelines given how close we are to the end of June, but nonetheless, the point is that the proposed amendment deals explicitly with the issue of auto theft. So it is curious for you to say that the issue of auto theft has no relevance to the amendment when the amendment includes a proposal for additional meetings precisely on the issue of auto theft. I think Mr. McKinnon has revealed something that doesn't entirely surprise me, that he and perhaps other members of this committee have not even familiarized themselves with the amendment that we're talking about. And of course, they would have had weeks in which to do so because we did move this amendment a number of weeks ago. It's on the public record, and it is regarding the agenda of the committee. And if we're going to have a discussion about it, then members should have read it. But on the other hand, I do sympathize with members like Mr. McKinnon who did not read the amendment and weren't prepared for this discussion today because this wasn't what was on the agenda.
Back to your, I think that's enough debating with Mr. McKinnon. Can we get back to your amendment, please? Thank you. Okay.
Ms. O'Connell was concerned that I was only challenging the record and decisions of female members of the committee, and Mr. McKinnon did say some things that were clearly problematic. So I hope she appreciates that I've demonstrated that I'm happy to hold Liberals accountable of all types. Now, on to the issue that I was discussing before I was interrupted by the point of order from the member who maybe just for the benefit of Mr. McKinnon and other members, I wonder maybe the clerk can distribute the amendment just so that we don't have this kind of confusion going forward. These are the statistics in terms of the rise of auto theft and why Canadians are gravely concerned about it and why I think legitimately they are seeking answers from ministers on it. There has been a 34.1% increase in auto thefts across Canada in the period from 2015 to 2022, which I assume is the latest point. We have Statistics Canada numbers available. Based on what we're hearing anecdotally, I think members would expect that they may well have gone up substantially further since 2022. There's been a particularly dramatic spike in certain regions of the country, 120% increase in auto thefts in New Brunswick, 190% in Moncton, 59% in Quebec, 105.9% increase overall in Montreal, 122.5% increase in Ontario, 122% increase in the Ottawa-Gatineau area. This is staggering. In the tenure of this NDP Liberal government, there has been a over 200% increase in auto thefts in the greater Toronto area. 216.94% increases in auto theft. Dramatic numbers. The government's own news release, in fact, says that in 2022, close to 10,000 vehicles, 9,600 vehicles approximately, were stolen in the Toronto area alone. According to the Canada Finance and Leasing Association, that represents a 300% increase since 2015. And this is why we think it is important to study the issue of auto theft. Notionally, members of other parties said they wanted to study the issue of auto theft, and yet they have tried to block at every turn meaningful action on this issue. The government trumpeted the fact that they were going to have a summit. They had a meeting at which this was discussed, and Mr. Rodriguez says it was a great summit. And look, I would actually love to hear more from him about what the government has done on this. I didn't receive an invitation, actually, Mr.
It's in the mail.
Rodriguez.
It's in the
mail. But I would welcome further interactions of this nature with Mr. Rodriguez. So I would now, and hopefully, if not by me, members have been persuaded by Mr. Rodriguez's clear desire to speak. I will move now that the committee proceed to hearing from the ministers.
Well, stop filibustering.
Please encourage your colleagues, Mr. Rodriguez, to vote in favor of my motion to proceed to allowing you to testify.
There's no debate once you move the motion.
That is for once correct, Ms. O'Connell. So let's vote.
Your mansplaining will go over well on your podcast. But it's okay. You're the party of controlling women's bodies. So.
Excuse me. Call for the vote, clerk.
Ms. O'Connell.
No.
Mr. Bedaway.
Like the last 5 times, no.
Mr. McKinnon.
No.
Ms. Zaid.
No.
Mr. Gay.
No.
Mr. Caputo.
Like the last 5 times, yes, to hear from the ministers.
Mr. Shipley.
Yes.
Mr. Mutz.
Yes.
Mr. Genius.
Yes.
Madame Michaud.
Contre.
Monsieur Boulris.
Mais non.
Yeas 4, nays 7.
Defeated. Mr. Genius, you have the floor.
Well, thank you, Chair. I'm sorry to disappoint Mr. Rodriguez. We have not for the first time. Yes, my primary priority here is to make my constituents happy, not Liberal ministers. But anyways, we have moved now 4 times that the committee proceed to hearing from ministers. And in all 4 of those cases, Liberals, as well as their coalition partners, have opposed that testimony from being able to occur. Our view, as reflected in the amendment that we've proposed, is that ministers appear separately for 1 hour each on the study of auto theft. That the Minister of Public Safety be invited to appear separately for 2 hours for consideration of the main estimates and his leadership ambitions. Sorry, no, that's not in there. Just the main estimates, don't worry. Or for 1 hour on main estimates and 1 hour on, I guess the motion says Arrive Can. It should really say the Arrive Scam Scandal, but we chose not to use that word in hopes that it would have a better chance of passing. That's with respect to ministers appearing, proposing in the sub-amendment that the committee undertake the legally required statutory review, that the draft report on the Bernardo transfer be immediately distributed, and that the committee proceed with hearings on that. We've also proposed that the committee hold its previously agreed upon meeting on the transfer of Luke Magnotta out of maximum security prison by the end of June. So this committee had agreed to look at the transfer of another violent criminal, Mr. Magnotta. And again, there was no mention in the original draft of the subcommittee report of completing that work. So in the same spirit of our desire to get to the bottom of what happened with Paul Bernardo, we believe that it is important for the committee to complete its work with respect to the prison transfer of Magnotta. When the committee has passed a motion calling on beginning the process of doing a study on an issue, those motions should have meaning. They should lead to that actual work being undertaken, and it being undertaken in a timely way. And then the issue of the additional auto theft meetings. Conservatives are proposing in this amendment to the subcommittee agenda that we hold 4 additional meetings as part of the auto theft study before the end of June. And it's obvious why. I was sharing some statistics previously on the issue of I was sharing on the rate of auto theft that has occurred.
Time now, so I'm going to suspend after the first hour, and we'll take a 5-minute break. Thank you to the witnesses. We appreciate your time, and we'll continue in 5 minutes with new witnesses when they move out. Thank you. Everybody ready? Good. Okay, we'll reconvene. So to begin with, I will be today resigning as chair, and I will be turning this over to the clerk for an election. I thank everybody for their time and effort on this committee. It's been an interesting process, but as of right now, I'm turning this over to the chair, and we'll call for an election. Thank you.
Honorable members of the committee, I see quorum. I must inform members that the clerk of the committee can only receive motions for election of the chair. The clerk cannot receive other types of motions, cannot entertain points of order, nor participate in debate. Je dois informer les membres que le greffier du
I must inform members that the clerk of the committee can only receive motions for the election of the chair. The clerk cannot receive other types of motions, cannot get point of orders.
The chair must be a member of the government party. Nous pouvons procéder à l'élection à la présidence.
We can now proceed to the election of the chair pursuant to Standing Order 1062. The chair must be a member of the government party.
Je suis prêt à recevoir des motions
Click.
pour la présidence. Madame O'Connell.
I move Ron McKinnon.
Il est proposé par Madame O'Connell.
It has been moved by Ms. O'Connell that Ron McKinnon be elected as chair of the committee. Any further motions?
Vote for Heath McDonald.
So it has been moved by Mr. Motz that Mr. Heath McDonald be chair. Since there's more than one candidate has been nominated, pursuant to Standing Order 1063, any motion received after the initial one shall be taken as a notice of motion, and such motion shall be put to the committee serial until one is adopted. So the first motion is, il est proposé par Madame O'Connell que
That the motion proposed by Ms. O'Connell that Mr. McKinnon be elected as chair of the committee.
be elected as chair of the committee. So who is in favor? 6, 7 in favor. Who is against? 7 yeas, 4 nays. Mr. McKinnon, you're the chair.
Well, thank you all. So we still have a motion on the floor, and Mr. Dennis has the floor.
Chair, just maybe a point of order. The committee has addressed another matter of business. I just want to make sure we're procedurally correct here. The committee has addressed the election of the chair, which I believe does supersede the item under consideration. Is it necessary to move another resumption motion if we're going to continue, given that we have dealt with on a different item? The committee cannot have two motions on the floor at the same time, and did just deal with a motion for the election of chair. So I would be of the view that this motion is not on the floor anymore, and I would welcome proceeding to witness testimony. If it is on the floor, I have more to say, but I don't think it's actually on the floor anymore.
My advice by the clerk is that it remains on the floor, that this matter of committee business did not sideswipe that. So if you want to go to committee business, we're happy to do a vote on this, but otherwise you have the floor and you may continue to speak.
Okay, Chair, that's not entirely clear to me, because I do think that it is a established principle of committee that you can't have multiple motions on the floor at once. I don't know if you're comfortable allowing the clerk to weigh in on the matter.
Did you want to speak or not?
Well, I do, but let's just make this clearer then. Committee can pronounce itself on the matter either way. I move that we proceed to hear from the witnesses.
Go ahead.
Ms. O'Connell,
No.
Mr. Bedaway,
No.
Mr. McDonald. No. Ms. Zaid.
No.
Mr. Gair.
No.
Mr. Caputo.
Yes, for the sixth time to hear.
Mr. Shipley.
Yes.
Mr. Matz.
Yes.
Mr. Genius.
Yes.
Madame Michaud.
Contre.
Monsieur Boulris.
Contre.
Yeas 4, nays 7.
Thank you. We shall continue with the debate. Mr. Dennis, you have the floor.
Well, thank you, Chair. I don't know if this sentiment is widely felt, but I do want to just say I'm sorry for the witnesses that have come here and put in the preparation that members of the Liberal Party, the Bloc, and the NDP just voted against us giving you the opportunity to hear. It couldn't be clearer. We just put forward a motion to allow proceed to hearing from the witnesses. And the other three parties voted against that motion to proceed to hearing from the witnesses. Of course, we have other business to attend to, the subcommittee report, and the chair could very easily have set aside time for that to occur. And Mr. Badaway is sort of heckling that we should just go to a vote on this motion. I don't think it's reasonable at all to propose an item of business that's not on the agenda for discussion and say, well, we must have an immediate vote before we will allow the items that are on the agenda to proceed. I would suggest that the committee undertake the items that are on the agenda, but that we set aside time to consider the matters in the subcommittee report. And nonetheless, let me just conclude my remarks here quickly with a couple final points. The amendment we've proposed is to establish certain things with respect to the future business of this committee. To establish that this committee should complete its hearings and present a report to the House on the Bernardo prison transfer, to complete the work that it has committed to with respect to the transfer of Luca Magnotta out of maximum security, that the committee should hold 4 additional meetings as part of its auto theft study before the end of June. And one item that I haven't mentioned yet is that the committee invite the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions to appear for 1 hour, the Minister of Public Safety and the Premier of BC to appear for 1 hour to discuss the impact of the government's approach to dangerous drugs on public safety and the diversion of taxpayer-funded drugs. This is another urgent public safety issue. That particular proposal does not have a timeline associated with it. That's something that could well be done in the fall. But at some point, our view is that ministers and those responsible more generally for this file at a time where there is an acute and escalating crisis around addiction and the diversion of taxpayer-funded drugs driving that crisis, that we should hear from those responsible. So this is broadly what we're trying to do. Is we're trying to establish the agenda of the committee going forward, and trying to establish it on a consensual basis. We're not going to accept that a backroom deal between coalition partners that excludes some parties should be the basis for setting the committee's future agenda. We think that it should be set in a consensual manner that allows the important work of the committee to conclude. And of course, we're prepared to make reasonable compromises in the course of establishing the committee